2024. We've completed the executive session. No commissioner's action is following that session. And we're going to item 2 on the morning's agenda, which is PARC Foundation Memorandum of Agreement and informational piece. And I'll look to the interim county manager to tell us what's going on.
County manager can't wait to hear what's going on.
Whoever's telling us what's going on.
Yeah, so I'm going to, by a little bit of time, I meant to contact Karen Weiss with a little heads up that we were getting started again. So I just let her know, but I'm not sure if Angela is.
Well, just as a background, the board will recall that last year you'd given staff direction to have a MOU with the PARC Foundation of Thurston County. That didn't get accomplished last year, so that direction is rolled forward to this year. And Public Works has been working on that MOU, and they're here today to report on their progress.
We are joined by our Public Works staff, Karen Weiss and Mike Lohman, and we're just trying to get going on the PARC Foundation item.
Great, thank you. Do you all have copies of the PARC Foundation?
I believe so.
Okay, perfect. All right. So this is a follow-up. I think as Robin mentioned, I heard part of that, so if I repeat some things, please forgive me. So Karen Weiss, Assistant Director of Public Works, Mike Lohman, Road Operations Manager to my right. The PARC Foundation, their mission is to promote donations for parks, trails, and associated facilities for Thurston County residents. And in 2023, the board had a desire to enter into an agreement with the PARC Foundation. And so we are here to follow up on putting that agreement into place for 2024. We have had some good conversations with PARC Foundation leadership, both their business manager and one of their fundraising people. They have an executive management staff of 3. And then quite an extensive volunteer board. I think they said they had 18 volunteers on their board, and then many, many other volunteers for special events and as needed. So we are at a point where we are bringing to the board a draft memorandum of agreement with the PARC Foundation. From our perspective, it is ready for the board's review and signature. We're going to have this as an agenda item tomorrow on the agenda with potential action by the board on March 19th. And basically this sets in place the framework for us having discussions with them after this is executed with their executive management to talk about what types of fundraising activities that they would be focused on our behalf. And those things can range from finding grants for projects, specific capital projects, or landmark projects. So when we talk about that, we talk about our trail connectivity program as an example. We've identified a couple of projects on our CIP, our capital improvement program, that are potential candidates for them to help us find grant funding. An example of that might be the Burfoot Park footbridge and stairway, which could potentially relieve some real estate excise tax funding that we currently have programmed in for that. Land acquisition, if we wanted to look at expanding our network in the future. And then also, interestingly enough, I had a conversation with their business manager, and we had originally proposed some maintenance and operations funding, because as we all know, that's a huge need for us. And they certainly said that that was interesting, and they'd be willing to explore that with us. One example that came to mind for me is we have a dump truck that needs replacing. Obviously, that's a pretty important expenditure for us to be able to continue the work of the parks and trails. So again, next steps for us would be sitting down with their executive management group and identifying what those needs would be for 2024, those efforts that they would be focused on. They actually help you get grant funding. They have grant funding also available through them. They just had an application deadline, which was March 1st, I think, so we wouldn't be eligible to apply for those funds until next year, but they do have 12 of their own funding funds that they do. And this is a consortium with Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, Yelm, and Tenino at this point. So with that, I will Leave it open to you for questions. And I will say this is a contribution on our part from non-departmental general fund of $20,000.
Commissioner Mejia?
Thank you. Okay, so this is covering, I guess, the parks piece of it, but I'm wondering about the arts. Who's going to be meeting, like, is the Park Foundation going to be meeting with Jeremy about kind of that piece of things? Our Historical Society, what is the plan there?
So we were not, what I would say is this was focused on getting the memorandum of agreement in place. We were obviously focused on public works
Specifically for
situation.
parks. Right, the county has no recreation program at all, and other than our special needs program in public health, and the board has had just a very brief discussion, but no real direction to staff on where you might like to go with that. So I think that that bears a whole lot more discussion by the board before staff start to talk about a recreation program.
So it wasn't, so when we had this discussion at the budget session, right, we, acknowledged that, the parks piece of it, but their big part of it for me was the arts and culture piece of it, because we do not have anything related to like really arts and culture besides our historical commission, right, who do the work, and trying to see if there is funding for kind of those pieces and those programs are like in place. Is there something like helping us with kind of, is there something for maybe more murals around the county? Like, I'm not sure, like, right, but just investing more in the arts and culture piece of it towards the county is what was discussed as well during the budget session.
Commissioner Fournier?
Yeah, I want to echo Commissioner Mejia's sentiments, but just say that this is the first step in the right direction. Start working on these things, along with, I would say, also reestablishing the Park Commission and just getting these discussions off the board, and then building a partnership with the Park Foundation, which is, it'll pay dividends. They've already spent years working on raising money for our specialized rec, and they've been just chomping at the bit, trying to partner with us to build bigger and better things. And so I love this.
You mentioned that we're not eligible because we didn't get in by March 1st or something for a certain subset of grants. I hope there's a lot of other grant applications coming up rather than we're just out of luck for this year already.
So that would just be for the grants that are administered through the Park Foundation. That is not precluding other grant opportunities that they would help facilitate on our behalf. So these would just be for grant funds that they manage. Does that make sense?
Well, to me,
There's not a lot of
what was that, Wayne?
there's not a lot of money from them.
I guess I've got a couple of questions on this. Is what's the review process going to be? We've already voted to do this, as far as I know, right? Aren't we still?
Yes.
We're headed down that track.
We've
right?
got the money in the budget.
We're ready to go.
We've asked
So what's the
Public
review
Works to
process
set it
going to be, so we know we're successful or not? And so we can decide, are we going to continue this relationship? And is this going to be state and federal, looking for money at both of those levels, state and federal?
I don't know about the federal piece of it. I think they probably are focused on more of the state side of things, but I do not know the answer to that question.
We shouldn't limit ourselves is all if we're going to tie in with somebody. I'm hoping they have a pretty aggressive schedule of what they're looking into on our behalf.
Sorry, what was the question?
It was,
Are they gonna be looking at state and federal sources or just state sources, was the question?
My experience with that, there's really no limitations, but like, a great example, like, so they're not, you're not going to go directly to the Park Foundation and ask for grants, but what they're going to do is they're kind of a side hustle, and they can do things that the government can't do, and they can, raise money, they can do, they're a nonprofit. And then in Tenino, I would pen, I would tab them to work with a specific segment of our, our recreation or culture community, and then they would go to the state and they got $160,000 for the stone carvers to be able to outfit one of the buildings that the stone carvers leased from the city so it would become, a city facility that gets an upgrade for a specific purpose on behalf of the nonprofit. And then another instance is where they came through was with the Dome Foundation, where they got $600,000 to buy 60 acres of forest land to then get brought into the city park. So it's not like, some of it's a little, like it's a sidebar, but it's like a very beneficial sidebar where you can put them to work on behalf of the county. And it works really well.
So,
What is the, I'm looking for the statement of work, if you will, in this contract. Where will I find that?
So the statement of work basically is that once this is executed, we meet with them to identify, it says right here,
They're gonna do,
right, the count, it's number section 1I, the county and the Park Foundation will develop a funding plan to identify priority projects and initiatives and guide fundraising efforts.
so looking at that section, the whole, almost all of the, letters, whatever you call them, subsections, talk about parks, trails, and
Associated facilities.
recreation.
Recreation.
So maybe this connects to what Commissioner Mejia was asking, but are arts and culture excluded from that, or can we add that in if we intended that to be part? Because it seems very parks and trails focused, and I know Commissioner Mejia is correct that she brought that up, and that was part of the discussion, is could they fund arts projects, arts programs, cultural events? So could we include?
I think the short answer is yes. We'd need to go back and have that conversation with them because I think we would want to tweak the wording a little bit to encompass that. I am aware that they do that type of funding. I know that they're on their funds. They even have some for, where are my notes, for arts and culture as well.
If we could just kind of
with
weave that
direction,
in.
If that's what you, right. I think we could just add another statement in there if that's the board's direction.
sure, we could definitely do that, and then we want to identify who would be promoting that part, since the county has no
So on the county side, where
art
does
and
that
culture
land?
or recreation program other than special rec. So,
We have to build it.
yes, we would have to build it, which is why we did not build it into this particular MOU. We left this focused on parks and trails, while the Board of County Commissioners is one of your priorities for this year, would have a discussion about what do you really want to do in terms of a recreation program, and where would that live in the county?
And where would the money come from?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's really not a public work. It really doesn't belong in CPED. Do you want to create something new in public health at this time under the social services umbrella? That's really given what your options are, either
Foundational public
that
health.
or,
Well, I think
If it was
we're
less,
overthinking it, I believe, right? We have a historical commission that already works on a lot of historic projects that are related to culture and arts. So just connecting it with that it's just seeing if there's more funding available for some of these projects. And then later on, it will give the availability for the board to expand and see if that's the direction they want to head in. But right now, it can be simply tied to our historic commission. they're constantly looking for funds.
Park Commission and CPAD. Okay, I mean, it's completely up to you where you wanna put it. It's,
I mean, I guess I'm seeing the issue though, Commissioner Mejia, if they go out and get us $100,000 for a public mural program, you threw that idea out, so I'm gonna take that. How do we administer that? Like, who in the county, like, spends that money and oversees that and sets it all up, and, like, we don't really have a place for that to live.
If I could show all my cards, I would like to see us move towards parks and recs being like their own department.
and the pendulum swings.
That's where I'd like to see things go in the future.
I think that this needs a robust conversation of the board where you really want to go with all of this.
Certainly.
We don't have.
And that's a fun discussion.
Roof clean.
Well,
We
and
gotta come up with funding.
it
That's the
creates a
problem.
whole management structure that you would have to pay for. There's a lot of consideration to creating a new department. And you may want to know why, when it was a standalone department, it was absorbed into Public Works. I mean, we can look at all the history of that.
I would love to. Thank you.
I guess, but on the top, I wouldn't mind to see arts and culture just mentioned. Like, we can always say, don't pursue that right
Right.
now, but like, just to give us that latitude.
Absolutely.
Because there might be something really small that the Historic Commission could sort of take the lead on, who knows? But it seems like, I don't think the Park Foundation would push back on that, right? Just expanding.
No, I don't think so.
They
I mean,
work on that stuff
right
anyway.
now, there is one representative to their executive committee that would be appointed, and right now, those are parks directors, from what I've learned, so I anticipate we would probably continue with that. But, I mean, I personally don't have an issue if we want to, collaborate on some of the arts and culture, if they're looking for something like that. It just would be a matter of, A, putting that in as one of the items that we potentially pursue, and then B, connecting with the right person here to find out what that need would be. And I would be looking for direction from Robin to determine who that is.
Yeah, I think we can, if it's easy enough to go back to the contact at the Park Foundation to be able to amend some of the language in section 1, somewhere just easily pulling out like sub D and E, where they really kind of talk about the parks, trails, and then we could potentially add the culture, arts and culture piece in there. That way it's folded in, and then find it as we go forward.
Okay, with that, and other changes, questions? I'm not seeing any.
Is this okay to still leave on the agenda setting for tomorrow? Do I need to pull it and until we make those revisions? Knowing that, is it okay to leave on the agenda setting for tomorrow while we're working on that revision?
Still have another week.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
keep the placeholder, and then
Okay.
if it doesn't come back in time for the 19th, then push it.
Okay, very good.
Any other questions or concerns from the board? Okay.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, that's the end of the agenda for this morning. We're back at 2 p.m. to address a different set of topics for Commissioners check-in, so at this point, we're adjourned.